Hi, my name's John, and this is Alyssa, and this is our thought for the week. As you would have just seen in the intro, there was my beautiful daughter, Alyssa. She's 6 weeks old, and she's just an amazing gift from God. But these last few weeks have not been very easy for us. When she was 2.5 weeks old, we found out she had an illness called meningitis. This was a particularly hard time for us. Over the Christmas period, we spent time in hospital, and we were there until the new year, and even visiting quite regularly now. But to see God's hand over the whole situation, it's been absolutely amazing. The first day when she was feeling quite ill, I remember it was a Saturday morning. I was at church because we just had the youth sleepover. I was very tired. And I got a call from my wife, Lavinia, saying, Alyssa isn't doing too well. So I rushed home. Thankfully, we've got an amazing youth team here who were able to hold the fort here with the young people while I went and checked on my daughter. But when I got home, I saw her and she was quite lifeless in my wife's arms. So at this point, I knew that I needed to call 111 just to see if everything was okay. I remember the night before, Lavinia, my wife, and my mum had taken Alyssa to the GP because she wasn't feeding and she wasn't swallowing. But the GP assured us that everything was okay. But I knew that we had to call 111. So I called 111, and at first they weren't too worried about anything. I told her the symptoms that Alyssa was showing, and they didn't seem too worried until I told them that she seemed to be quite lifeless. At this point, they sent an ambulance. And then once the ambulance got here, the paramedics were absolutely amazing, doing all the checks they needed to on her. But again, it didn't seem to worry them too much the way she was. But they said, usually we'll send you to a GP, but because it's a Saturday, most of the GPs are closed. So we're going to take you to A&E just to be sure. Then we got to A&E, and again, A&E weren't too fussed. From the outset, from what they looked at her, she seemed to be not too bad. They told the doctors upstairs about her, and again, they didn't seem too worried. So they stayed upstairs caring after the patients up there. But once they'd taken the blood test from Alyssa, the results they showed were just so abnormal. I remember they called upstairs to the doctor, and the doctor literally ran down the stairs because of how bad they were. He ran down. As soon as he got downstairs, he said, your baby is very ill and we need to take her to the resus room. Well, the reason I'm telling you all this is because throughout this whole process, although it's been horrifying, although it's been so hard, I've had sleepless nights worrying about her, God's hand has been over the whole thing. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that all things work together for the good to them that love God. And we can just see God's hand over this whole situation. So right from the beginning, when we called 111, I found an urge from God I needed to come home and check on our daughter, even though we'd been reassured by the GP that she was fine. When we called 111, they weren't going to send out an ambulance. But again, I believe God's hand was over the situation and the ambulance was sent out. And again, when the paramedics came, they did such an amazing job with her. But they were just going to send us to a GP. But again, God's hand was over the situation. And even though they weren't worried, they sent us to A&E. And again, in A&E, they weren't too bothered. But they did a blood test just in case. God's hand was over that situation. And we found out that she was actually very ill. And God's hand was over this whole situation, because when we got back to Reading after all this has happened, we saw the doctor who first saw her, and he came to us and said, I didn't want to tell you this at the time because it would have worried you. But when I talked to the consultant, he said that even if she came 1 hour later, things could have been completely different. So all these things, what could delay time, God had his hand over them. And now we have Alyssa, who is fully recovering right now, still on a few medications to help her along the way. But God's hand was over the whole situation. And just to complete just an amazing story of God's provision, Alyssa's heart was affected by sepsis while this was going on. And I remember on the Saturday night, a doctor came round to talk to us, and he told us a number of things it could be, a lot of them which meant her heart may be irreversibly damaged. And we were quite worried. I remember my wife being very, very scared. And so in the morning, I text one of our elders, George here, saying, in church this morning, can you pray for Alyssa's heart? So they prayed for Alyssa's heart at 10 o'clock. I, at this time, we were down in Southampton Hospital, was out having coffee with my dad. We had a very sleepless night, so I needed something to keep me awake. And I got a text from my mum at 10 o'clock saying, heart healed. I was so confused. I thought it was a typo. I said, Dad, I need to go check this out. I ran to the door of the intensive care unit. I saw Lavinia outside on the phone to my mum. And I said, Lavinia, have you just got the text? She said, no, I've been on the phone. I was like, my mum's just texted saying heart healed. Again, we weren't sure what was going on. Just literally 12 hours earlier, we were told that the heart may be irreversibly damaged. So we finally got to the bedside, and a cardiologist was there who'd just done another scan on her heart. And they said, I can't believe I'm telling you this, but her heart has been completely healed. God has had his hand over this whole horrible time for us, and he made all things work together for his good. Because even what the enemy means for evil, God will turn it to our good. And we're just so thankful that we have a God who loves us, and a God who still heals and still does miracles today, just like he did 2,000 years ago. Because God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. So my thought for the week this week is God's got his hand on your situations. Things that you might think are out of your control. God loves you, and God cares for you, and God will bring you through these situations, no matter how hard they might get. So that's been my thought for the week.